singers or who's here? Actors, singers, models? All of the above? Oh, okay. Actor? Yes. And model and singer. And Vegas performer. I'm going to need a volunteer. Who would be willing to do a monologue? Okay, great. And who would be willing?
No singing, Ron.
Are you a singer or model? Okay, great. So you'll do the singing. And we'll do, okay. We'll do both. You two. Okay? Do short monologues to get you started. So while we're waiting for my podium, I'm just curious, has anyone here ever experienced, oh, it's here. Yeah. Oh, it's union, so I can't take it. No, all I really need is somewhere to keep my notes.
Yep.
How long do we have? Oh, okay. Now, I have some handouts to give up, but I wasn't expecting this large of a group, so at the end, if there's anyone interested, the handouts are over here. It just reviews a little bit of what I talked about. If there aren't enough handouts, I was told that you could email Nancy, and she'll send you them, and I'll send her the handouts. And also, there's some cards and some information about a book that I wrote. The book is not really related exactly to this subject, but what it is, it's about character development based on psychological theories. So I had written a book several years ago, and I've consulted on different films and television shows, helping develop characters. It's for writers and actors. If you want to take a look at it, it's over there. It's called Real People. Did you want to, should I just introduce myself? Or? It wasn't in the contract. Well, I already introduced myself.
Okay, welcome everybody. Of course, you know now this is Dr. Howard Gluss with the clinical psychologist practice serving and specializing in the film and entertainment industry. Dr. Gluss is also a renowned author, speaker, and broadcaster. He's been broadcasting on public stations in the U.S. since 2008. His radio shows regularly featuring Pulitzer Prize, Academy Award winners, and other visionaries at the top of their field. Please welcome Dr. Howard Gluss.
Thanks, everyone. First, I'm curious, anyone here ever experienced any kind of stage fright or anxiety before you perform? Okay, so everyone else is lying. Because if you experience any kind of anxiety before you perform. Of course. So what I'm going to tell you is everybody, almost everyone, experiences a certain level of anxiety, fear, energy before you perform. The key about this lecture is, how do we take that energy and turn it into something positive and not something negative that overwhelms you and doesn't allow you to do the performance that you really want to do? So I've come up with some thoughts and principles that I want to share. So one of the first, and these are just things for you to think about, okay? One of the first things I want you to think about in relationship to your anxiety, especially here, a lot of you are doing auditions in front of judges, casting directors. There's a big hope that you're going to be discovered or people are going to see your talent. So it feels as though a lot is on the line. And what we do is our unconscious relationship, it's what's in the back of our mind with the judges, is going to influence us. So in other words, we'll go and be a little Freudian and psychological. If we had parents, let's say, that were very difficult to deal with, or we grew up in a very difficult situation or judgmental situation, we may project those feelings onto the judges or other audience members and feel that they are going to be very critical of us. So we're going to unconsciously create a relationship with those judges and maybe bring excessive fear into that relationship. So what I want you to think about is that when you're sitting in front of the judges, in front of the casting directors, agents, they are really the good parent. They want you to do well. They want you to succeed. They're looking for people to cast. They're looking for people to have in their agency. So I want you to think about that. That's a positive relationship and not a negative relationship. And when you're sitting back and you're ready to go on, envision that these are people that want you to succeed. Because sometimes we experience too much anxiety because we feel that those people are going to be too critical of us. And again, that can be based on our past experience. So if you're sitting in front of the judges and you're starting to talk or you're starting to sing and you start to experience some of those feelings, what you could do is go deeper into the experience of what you're performing and try not to pay attention to those thoughts. So if it's a song or a monologue, go deeper into the words, go deeper into the meaning. If it's a song, go deeper into what the song means to you. Try to stay connected to what you're doing. Because what we tend to do unconsciously is we depersonalize when we get too anxious. In other words, we try to disconnect from an experience because it feels somewhat dangerous. We want to make it into a positive experience and stay focused. So stay focused on the words, stay focused on the song. Don't be afraid to look at the casting directors, and remember, if you're working with them, think of somebody positive in your life that you could envision who they are. So if you have a coach that you've worked with, imagine that they're there. Because once you start focusing more and get less disconnected, you'll start relaxing a little bit more. I mean, I feel even as I'm talking to you guys, if I start to feel that I'm getting a little anxious, I take a breath, I look around, I focus, I see people sleeping, and I see some people paying attention, but I try to stay connected to what I want to say and try to stay in the moment. So that's the first thought about your relationship with the audience. And you can do that at home too. You could start envisioning before you go on, once you learn your material, what that relationship would be like, who you need them to be to keep you calm and keep you centered and keep you focused. The next thought is, I know everybody here has worked so hard, relentlessly on their pieces, and you've done it 1,000 times, and you know it inside and out. But it's rare, it's not rare, but when you're auditioning for someone, it's going to be a completely new experience, even though you've done it 1,000 times. So you have to try to not work so hard to repeat what you did, but stay in the moment and focus. And it may be a little bit different, and it may not be perfect, but it's going to be good enough because you've done your homework, you're here, you know what you're doing. If you worry too much about making it perfect, actually that anxiety will start to escalate, and you're going to start to do what I call sort of the death during an audition, is you're going to start to judge yourself too harshly. So stay in the moment, trust that what you've done is good enough. Think of it almost like an improv, and either it will be something new and different, because every time you come up, that's what live performances are about, it's going to be a little different. So don't think of, I have to do what I did yesterday. Trust that it's there, and whatever will come out will come out. I'm going to repeat myself. So if you try to do it perfect and you start to feel like you're not getting it perfect, you're going to create more anxiety and probably do more harm, versus just saying, I just got to do it good enough. You know, we use this theory in parenting, just as an aside. Parents say all the time, you know, I'm not a perfect parent, I'm not a perfect parent. I brought up my kid, I made some mistakes. And as psychologists, we say, well, if there's more in the positive side than in the negative side, and if you were good enough, chances are your kids are going to turn out okay. So that's how we try to reassure parents not to worry so much about being perfect. So that's that concept. So we're going to talk about different concepts. So this is about you being mindful, about thinking things through. This is not about a cookbook, 7 steps to eradicating stage fright, because anxiety is always going to be with you. The key is how you're going to use it. So the next thought I want you to think about as you contemplate the idea of anxiety is a psychological term called a port key. So first I'm going to explain what that term means. That means that our present experience may take us back to an earlier experience, and a lot of times that earlier experience may be a negative experience. So for instance, let's say you had a really bad audition, which, by the way, everybody has bad auditions. If you're lucky enough to audition a lot, you're going to have some that miss, and you've got to be willing to accept that. But if you come up and you're start to perform and you're starting to experience some stage fright, and your unconscious mind goes back to that negative experience, you're probably going to suffer a lot and have a worse experience. So think of it that the present experience may trigger something in the past. Now this is very helpful when you're doing when you're rehearsing too, if you start seeing yourself get very negative. So one of the things I tell patients is, let's say you come in and you have a certain experience and you feel like, I'm kind of feeling like I'm much more anxious than really I should be in this experience. In other words, out of a scale of 1 to 10, I may be having an 8 experience or a 9 experience, but this experience, especially let's say an audition, should be, a 5. So chances are that it's triggering something from your unconscious that may be making you feel anxious. So what I would suggest is when you're rehearsing, if you start to experience that experience, maybe write down, like in a diary, what you think might be being connected to that negative experience, and see if you could find a way to what we call work through it, so it doesn't affect you. And again, I'm going to be, a lot of this stuff overlaps, so I want to connect some dots for you. So again, if you're in the moment and you're having that experience and you start to feel that anxiety, the best way to deal with it is to get more focused into the moment and get more focused into the words and more focused on your objective and more focused on the song, and compartmentalize and let those thoughts go. Try not to connect to them, because if you connect to them too much, you're going to start basically destroying the audition. So that's a third thought, that idea of a port key, something that connects from way into the past. The next thought to think about when you're preparing for your audition is organization. The more you can create a powerful framework for yourself, the more organized you can be, the more you know the history of the character, the more you connect to the song, the more you can personalize the song, the better off you're going to be, because in those higher anxiety moments, you're going to be able to hold on to that framework. It's as though you're in a house that is having an earthquake, and you're holding on and you're standing, well, us Californians know this, you stand in the door, or you stand in the strongest parts of the house, the framework. So don't be afraid to overdo your homework, over-prepare, do whatever you need to do. That's the other thing. This is such a personalized process for everyone that you have to be true to yourself, that what works for you may not work for somebody else. So some people may be able to come in and just wing it. Other people need to do a lot of homework. There's no right or wrong. You've got to do what's right for you. Then what you've got to do is, when you're on the stage, you've got to forget about everything. And this is the hardest part. You've got to trust that it's there. You got to trust that enough of the work will be there to keep you focused. So the fourth point to think about is be as organized as you possibly can be. Now, the next concept is turning anxiety, I call it, into pleasure and meaning. One of the main things I want you to get is, people come to me and they think, I don't want to be anxious during auditions, and I say, that's not possible. So, because if you try really hard to not be anxious, and you start to get anxious, it's going to be cumulative, and you're going to get more anxious. So what you have to do, it's like a snowball effect. Now, different people have different levels of anxiety. What you have to do is to learn how to harness that anxiety and turn it into something positive for yourself versus something negative. What anxiety means in psychology is there's a psychological term called affect, A-F-F-E-C-T, and it's like you're getting charged too much. It's like you took in, if you're in your car and you went to the battery and you charged it too hard. So you have all this energy flowing through yourself, and you've got to be able to do something with it. It's physics. So sometimes when you're in an audition, you can't just deep breathe,